Hello again. This is Michael Whitaker. This is photo post number 15 of the 21 photo posts I'm doing on LinkedIn and sharing on Facebook. The topic of this post is managing abundant photo opportunities. The official photo for this post is harness racing at Neshoba County Fair. Excuse me. This photo is from a formal project that I did that's entitled Up Close and Personal, Faces of the 2010 Neshoba County Fair. This is the official photo, but unlike the previous videos, I will show an additional 10 photos during this video to make a specific point about managing abundant photo opportunities. A little background: Neshoba County Fair is in Philadelphia, Mississippi. It first began in 1889, over 130 years ago. When it first began, due to the rural nature of the area, people who came to the fair would camp out and stay near the fair so they could stay there more than one day. Over time, this process of coming and staying for the fair became more formalized. Eventually, they started building what they call cabins, which we'll discuss in a minute. And people would come and stay for the entire fair. The fair is now 8 days long, and people come and stay in their cabins for the entire 8-day fair. That's the reason the fair is referred to as the 8-day giant house party. They come, they stay in their cabins, and they stay for the entire fair. I wrote a very detailed proposal for this project. I learned about the fair through friends. I had discussed it extensively through friends, and I decided I wanted to submit a formal written proposal. I researched what I knew, and I did planning that I thought was extensive for my proposal. The proposal was approved, and I was awarded a press pass. In most cases, a press pass is a really great thing. In this case, it was a good thing to have, but it was also a bit of a double-edged sword, because these people come and stay for 8 days, and they got to where they recognized me. And the press pass would be a sort of a flashing red flag that would say, hey, come over here, let me talk to you about my cabin. So the proposal was approved. I was awarded a press pass, and I began working on photographing the 8-day fair. It didn't take me but a couple of hours to figure out that the fair was much more complicated and complex than had been explained to me. I could not back out of doing it. I didn't want to back out of doing it. But I had to sort of, shift my attention and do sort of some last-minute planning. I sat down that first day and divided the activities and events of the fair into 14 categories, which became my 14 categories for photo opportunities. Very abundant to have that many categories. And some of the categories had subcategories, so it was a lot of information. The best way I can demonstrate the complexity and the abundance of the photo opportunities for this project is to show you some of the slides, not just this one photo. I selected this one photo, harness racing at the fair, because it represents or it presents the cabins in the background. Those 4 buildings in the background of this photo are what they refer to as cabins. 3 are 3-storied. The 4th is 2-storied. There are some 1-story cabins, but most of them were multi-storied with the living space. You eat, drink, and congregate on the 1st floor, and on the 2nd or 3rd floor are the bedroom areas. Most of these cabins sleep 30 or more people. When people bring their family to the fair, they bring their entire family to the fair. This particular photo is about the harness racing at the fair. It was very interesting because all the racers, all the horse owners, are all African Americans. They come to the fair. I think they race a total of 6 or 7 days. And there's enough of them that they have multiple races, 6 or 7 races every day where they compete against each other. So this is one of the activities, and this goes on for several hours every afternoon. It was fascinating. I had a digital camera when I did this project, so I had dozens and dozens and dozens of photos of the harness racing. So that's one of the categories, was harness racing. They also had a rodeo. It was a regular rodeo. It lasted 3 nights. There were all kinds of events. This is the bronc riding, bareback bronc riding, but there was bull riding, calf roping, the whole thing. It went on all that time for 3 nights in a row. It became a category in its own, and it was at night. And if I wanted to capture images, I had to go and capture the images that were always after dark, because the fair happens in July in Mississippi in the hot, humid summer. So a lot of the activities where there are crowds happens after the sun goes down. This is another example of a cabin. It's 3 stories high, has a porch and 2 balconies. These folks are from Mississippi, but they went to college at the University of Tennessee, so they painted their cabin this bright University of Tennessee orange. But it's very typical. You can see the sign on the front says the Big Orange Cabin. This is not my idea of what a cabin looks like. My idea is a single-story cabin, but the idea of a cabin has gotten more elaborate and sophisticated over the years. Every cabin has some way of posting the history of their cabin. This particular lady stopped me and said, "I've noticed you taking photos. Will you come with me to my cabin so I can show you the photo history of our cabin?" She was very persuasive, so I went, and she's pointing out different things. They have photographs from every single year they have gone to the fair. And that's what this wall is, this whole wall, and it's bigger than what you can see in this photo of photos. And you can see some of the folks over here on the left even look a little older. So it's very interesting to look at the background and the history of the cabins. And that alone could be an entire project, a book or something like that, because there is a rich amount of history about what goes on in these cabins. I don't remember if I mentioned, but there's 600 of these cabins. So that's 600 cabins with this amount of history. Amazing amount of history. This is a mule race. First mule race I had never been to. And these are just people who own the cabins own their own mules. Some of them do. And one day they get out and they race the mules against each other. This category was sort of resident activities, because these people are the people who live in the cabins. And this is an example of a different kind of activities in which they engage. This category had several subcategories. There is a Midway, a regular carnival Midway with rides. You could go to the fair Midway and find the rides that you find at any fair. I chose to show the Ferris wheel in this image because the lady in the foreground has on a t-shirt with the Ferris wheel and the Neshoba County Fair name with it. But it's like any Midway. There's all these rides to go. There's also Midway games. This was one of the more popular games. You can see the sign up in the corner, Win Live Bunnies Here. If you throw a ball and get it in these floating bowls in this little pool of water, you win a rabbit. And it was not unusual to see people walking around the fair carrying the rabbit under their arm. And again, this was a whole different category. People playing these Midway games to see what they can win. There were also horse races. Typically every day when there were harness races, the harness races were followed by horse races. You don't have to be a horse enthusiast to know this is not the Kentucky Derby. The horses are all owned by farmers who also race them. They're not big fancy thoroughbred horses that you would take to the different tracks all over the country. The jockeys are not the type of jockeys you'll see at the Kentucky Derby. They're apparently sort of a team of jockeys who go around and get paid to ride the horses of the local people who enter their horses in the races. You can see this is sort of a confused event at this point. This horse is way out of the inside track here. This horse is cutting off this horse. You can see he's being pulled up. But still, they're very interesting races. It's fascinating to watch them. And this was a whole category of pictures. And again, there's unofficial wagering on the races. There were livestock shows throughout the fair. This particular day, it's cows. There were pigs, goats, and sheep on other days. This young lady is a high school student who raised this cow from a calf, and she's entered it in the competition here to hopefully win some sort of ribbon. This was another whole category. And there were four subcategories with this one because you had the cows, pigs, sheep, and goats. There is a very political aspect to the fair. In fact, there's one day when all the big-name politicians throughout the state of Mississippi come and give speeches, and there are also local politicians that come and do the same thing. It's not hard to imagine why this woman caught my attention. Very unusual outfit. And she has written on her stomach here, Raising Arizona, which turns out has to do with the fact that she was pregnant at this time. We didn't discuss why she has Obama on her chest or why she placed roses, artificial roses, in his mouth. But it's not unusual to see people making political statements at this fair. Generally in the late afternoon and evening, there are concerts every day. This is the concert from the very first night. This is a relatively famous group at this point. I don't remember their name. They have since become very well known. But if you buy a ticket to the fair, whether it's a day ticket or for the whole 8 days, the price of admission includes the music every night. So you can see people crowd down to hear whatever music's playing. So this is a big event every night. Again, this was a whole category. There was music, different afternoons, and different evenings. So I have dozens of photos of music from the fair throughout the 8 days I was there. So I hope with just these 10 additional images, you can see that there was literally a huge abundance of photo opportunities for this project. It was more than I could handle. And at the end of 8 days, I was exhausted. I stayed for the entire 8 days. I did not stay at the fair. I had 3 different families offer to let me stay in their cabin, but I was so desperate for rest at the end of every day, I went back to a motel room and rested. Usually I stayed till after midnight, and I was back again by 10 o'clock the next morning. So I needed my rest every night, so I did not stay at the fair. But you can see this is a very complex fair. There was a lot going on, and it was too much for one person to take on. I learned that by trial and error. Trial and error is a valid way of learning, but it's not the easiest way to learn. I have since learned to do extensive research. I'll read everything I can find, and I can talk to everybody that I can find. I want to know what to expect. I showed up for the Neshoba County Fair basically unprepared to do what I did. I'm glad I had a digital camera at this point, because I would have burned through tons of film if I had used a film camera. So my recommendation to you is, if you're going to do a complex project, do the research, do the extensive research, and then do detailed planning, and be prepared on the first day of the project, of shooting the project, to determine if your planning, your research has been enough, or if you're going to end up like me, exhausted at the end of this 8-day period. The other thing that occurred to me on the second day of this project is that it would have been nice to have another photographer, maybe 2 more photographers with me, to divide up the photographic responsibilities and capture more images. I'm pleased with most of my images. I have a problem of always seeing a way that they can be better, and I would have loved to have had the opportunity to spend more time focusing on specific categories, but I just couldn't do it. So adding a colleague or 2 to help is a really good idea. I'm currently exploring options for identifying and inviting people to work on future large projects with me, because as I'm aging, I can do less on my own. Now I would not take on a project like the Neshoba County Fair by myself. So if you're planning projects, do the research, do the planning, and think about if someone needs to join you with your effort. That's all I have to say about this post, about these images. As always, I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your interest in what was going on in my mind when I captured images, although obviously for this post, not enough was going on in my mind because I became overwhelmed. I've forgotten the topic of the next post. I've been very busy today on 3 different projects, photo projects, so I apologize for not making myself a note. It will be in a couple of days, and I'll see you then. Thank you.